At dawn, when the city was still holding its breath, Kenji missed his alarm again. The phone lay face down on the wooden floor beside his futon, silent, accusing. Pale morning light slipped through the cracked window and touched the old scar on his left hand, a thin white line, like a reminder carved by time itself. Kenji stared at the ceiling, heart already heavy, knowing what this meant. Another broken morning. Another promise to himself quietly buried before the day even began. Outside, somewhere far away, a train screamed along its rails. Life was moving forward. Kenji was not. He sat up slowly, joints stiff, head fogged with the familiar shame. Once, long ago, he had been a man with direction. A man who woke before the sun, who trained until his muscles burned and his breath shook. A man who believed discipline was not a burden, but a blade, sharp, honest, and clean. Now he was 36, living in a narrow apartment above a closed noodle shop, surviving on freelance work that came and went like weak tides. His days had no shape. His nights had no end. Sleep came late, restless and shallow, haunted by memories he tried not to touch. On the wall hung a sword. It was old, its scabbard scratched and faded. It did not belong there, in a room cluttered with laundry and half-finished notebooks. It belonged to another life. Kenji's eyes drifted to it every morning, and every morning, the same ache returned to his chest. His father's sword. Kenji rose and stood barefoot on the cold floor. He bowed his head slightly, not out of ritual anymore, but habit. Or maybe guilt. He could never tell the difference. His father, Masaru, had been a man of routine. A former kendo master who believed the way you lived your day was the way you lived your life. Every morning at the same time. Every action deliberate. Every choice clean. When the day has a spine, Masaru used to say, it can stand. Kenji remembered those mornings vividly. The smell of tatami mats. The sound of bamboo swords cracking the air. The quiet strength in his father's voice when he corrected a stance, adjusted a grip, or simply stood watching, saying nothing at all. Silence had been Masaru's greatest teacher, and Kenji had learned well. Too well, perhaps. Because when his father died, suddenly, without warning, Kenji's world collapsed inward. No final lesson. No goodbye. Just a hospital room filled with machines, and a sword handed to him with trembling hands. After that, routines felt cruel. Every schedule reminded him of what was gone. Every disciplined morning echoed with absence. So he let it all fall apart, telling himself he needed time, that grief had no timetable. Years passed. The city changed. Friends drifted away. Kenji stayed exactly where he was, trapped between who he had been and who he was afraid to become. That morning, as sunlight climbed higher, Kenji felt the familiar pressure building behind his eyes. He turned away from the sword and went to the small kitchen. The sink was full. The counter cluttered. He boiled water for coffee, staring at nothing while the kettle screamed. His phone buzzed. A message. He almost ignored it. Almost. But something, curiosity, or maybe fate, made him pick it up. The message was from an unknown number. If you keep living without a routine, you will keep dying slowly. Come to the old dojo at sunset. Kenji stared at the words. His pulse quickened. The old dojo had been closed for years. Condemned. Forgotten. It sat at the edge of the city like a ghost, its wooden bones rotting quietly beneath weeds and dust. No one went there anymore. Kenji read the message again. And again. His first instinct was to laugh it off. A prank. A scam. Someone playing games. But his fingers trembled. Because the words felt personal. Uncomfortably so. And because, deep down, he felt something stir, something he had not felt in a very long time, recognition. The day passed in a blur. Kenji tried to work, but his focus slipped away. He forgot to eat. He forgot to breathe properly. The message burned in his pocket, heavier with every hour. At sunset, the sky turned the color of old embers. Kenji stood outside the dojo, heart pounding. The building looked worse than he remembered. The wooden sign hung crooked. Windows were broken. The doors creaked open with a sound like a long sigh. Inside, The air smelled of dust and rain-soaked wood. Light filtered through cracks in the ceiling, painting broken shapes on the floor, and in the center of the room stood a man. He was old. Older than Kenji expected. His back slightly bent, hair white and tied neatly behind his head. He wore simple training clothes, clean and pressed, as if the world outside had never changed. His eyes, however, were sharp. "You're late," the old man said calmly. Kenji froze. I didn't know if excuses are how routines die." The man interrupted gently. "Come closer." Kenji's legs moved before his mind could argue. Each step echoed loudly in the empty space. The old man studied him in silence. Not judging. Measuring. "You walk like a man carrying invisible weight," he said at last. "Your days have no rhythm. Your nights have no end." Kenji swallowed. "Who are you?" The old man smiled faintly. "Someone your father trusted." The words hit like a punch. "My father is dead," Kenji said, sharper than he meant to. "So is the man you used to be," the old man replied. "But neither are truly gone." The old man turned and walked toward the far wall, where a single mat lay rolled and waiting. "Sit," he said. Kenji obeyed. "For 7 days," the old man continued, "you will follow a routine so simple it will offend your pride. You will wake before the sun. You will train. You will work. You will rest. Nothing more. Nothing less." Kenji laughed weakly. "I've tried routines. They never last." The old man's eyes hardened. "Because you tried to control your life. Samurai do not control. They align." He unrolled the mat with slow precision. "A routine is not a prison," he said. "It is a path. And paths must be walked daily, even when the weather is cruel." Kenji felt his chest tighten. Hope and fear tangled inside him. "And if I fail?" he asked quietly. The old man looked at him for a long moment. "Then you will continue living exactly as you are," he said. "That is the true failure." Silence filled the dojo. Kenji looked around, the broken walls, the fading light, the ghost of his past breathing around him. His hands curled into fists. He thought of the sword on his wall, of his father's voice, of mornings wasted and nights empty. The old man bowed once. "We begin tomorrow," he said. "Before dawn." Kenji opened his mouth to respond, and suddenly the dojo lights flickered. The wind howled through the broken windows. The old man turned toward the shadows at the back of the room, his expression changing, tightening, like a man sensing an approaching storm. "Do you hear that?" he asked. Kenji listened. Footsteps, coming closer. The footsteps stopped just inside the doorway. Kenji's breath caught. His eyes darted between the shadows and the old man, whose posture had changed, no longer relaxed, no longer patient. His spine straightened slightly, and his right hand hovered near his side, as if a sword might still be there. A young man stepped into the fading light. He wore a cheap jacket, torn at the sleeve, and his eyes were restless, sharp in a different way. Behind him came 2 more figures, laughing softly, careless, loud in a place that demanded quiet. "Thought this place was abandoned," one of them said. "Didn't expect monks." The old man did not move. "Leave," he said simply. The young men laughed again, but the sound faltered. Something in the old man's voice, steady, unshaken, cut through their confidence. "We're just looking around," the first one muttered. "No harm." Kenji felt his heart pounding. Old fear rose in him, familiar and bitter, the fear of confrontation, of chaos, of things he could not control. He had spent years avoiding moments like this, slipping away before conflict could take shape. The old man turned his head slightly, not taking his eyes off the intruders. "Kenji," he said calmly. "Stand?" Kenji hesitated. "Stand," the old man repeated. Kenji pushed himself up, legs stiff. The floor felt uneven beneath his feet. His hands shook, but he clenched them at his sides. "This place isn't for you," the old man said to the young men. "Go." Something in his certainty finally reached them. One shrugged, trying to save face. "Whatever. Creepy old place anyway." They turned and left, their footsteps fading into the night. Silence returned. Heavy. Sacred. Kenji exhaled, realizing he had been holding his breath. You felt it, the old man said without looking at him. The urge to disappear. Kenji nodded slowly. That is what a life without routine creates. The old man continued. A man who avoids the moment instead of meeting it. He turned back to Kenji. Tomorrow, before dawn. Do not be late. The old man walked past him, toward a side door Kenji hadn't noticed before. It closed softly behind him. Kenji stood alone in the dojo, heart still racing. He didn't know why, but tears burned behind his eyes. Not from fear, but from something else. Something that felt like being seen. That night, sleep did not come easily. Kenji lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the city breathe. His phone lay on the floor again, alarm set for 4:30 a.m. He stared at it like an enemy. Before dawn, his mind filled with doubts. I'll fail. I always do. One good day doesn't fix years of ruin. He turned onto his side, pulling the blanket tighter, trying to escape his own thoughts. At some point, exhaustion dragged him under. The alarm exploded into sound. Kenji jolted awake, heart pounding. For a brief moment, instinct screamed at him to silence it, to roll over, to steal just 10 more minutes. His hand hovered over the phone, and then he saw the sword on the wall. He sat up. The room was cold. The world outside still dark. His body protested every movement as he stood, dressed, and stepped into his shoes. By the time he reached the dojo, the sky was just beginning to lighten. The old man was already there, kneeling on the mat, eyes closed. You're on time, he said without opening them. They trained in silence. No speeches. No explanations. Just movement, simple exercises. Slow steps. Controlled breathing. Repeated again and again. Kenji's legs burned. His shoulders ached. Sweat soaked through his shirt despite the cold. His mind screamed for distraction. What's the point? How does this fix anything? But the old man did not allow pauses long enough for complaint to take root. When the sun finally crested the horizon, the old man stood. That is enough, he said. Now go live your day. Kenji blinked. That's it. The old man nodded. Routine is not about exhaustion. It is about return. The days that followed were brutal in their simplicity. Wake before dawn. Train. Work. Eat simply. Sleep early. No grand goals. No dramatic promises. Just repetition. And that was what broke him. By the third day, Kenji felt raw. Not just physically, but emotionally. Without the chaos of his old habits, there was nowhere to hide. Memories surfaced during training. His father's voice. The hospital room. The moment he had stopped believing effort mattered. On the fourth morning, his legs refused to cooperate. He sat on the dojo floor, breath ragged, frustration boiling over. I can't do this, he snapped. It's pointless. The old man studied him. Then stop. Kenji looked up, startled. Quit, the old man said calmly. Go back to your room. Sleep late. Drift. Kenji's jaw tightened. That's not what you want. What I want is irrelevant, the old man replied. What do you want? Kenji opened his mouth, and nothing came out. The silence stretched. I don't know, Kenji whispered. The old man nodded once. Good. That is where discipline begins. That evening, Kenji returned to his apartment feeling hollow. He cooked rice and vegetables, ate in silence. His phone buzzed with messages he ignored. He washed his bowl immediately after eating, hands moving without thought. He noticed something strange. The noise in his head was quieter. Still there, but quieter. On the sixth day, rain poured over the city. The dojo roof leaked, water dripping onto the floor. Kenji trained anyway, feet slipping slightly, breath steady despite the cold. He fell once. Hard, pain shot through his wrist. He lay there, staring at the ceiling, rainwater splashing nearby. The old man did not rush to help him. Kenji pushed himself up slowly, teeth clenched. He bowed, not because he was told to, but because it felt right. That night, as he walked home under gray skies, something inside him shifted. Not confidence. Not joy. Stability. On the seventh day, the old man brought out the sword. Kenji's father's sword. Kenji froze. How did you? Your father gave it to me, the old man said softly. He said you would need it when you forgot who you were. Kenji's hands trembled as he took it. You are not broken, the old man continued. You were unaligned. A samurai's routine is not about control. It is about honoring the day. Kenji bowed deeply, tears finally falling, soaking into the mat. The old man stepped back. Your routine will change. Life always does. But the spine remains. Kenji looked up. What happens now? The old man smiled faintly. Now you walk without me. Before Kenji could respond, the old man turned and walked toward the shadows of the dojo, disappearing into the dim light beyond. Kenji stood alone, sword in hand, rain tapping softly around him. For the first time in years, tomorrow did not feel like an enemy. The next morning, Kenji woke before the alarm. There was no jolt of panic. No rush of guilt. His eyes opened naturally, as if his body had remembered something his mind had forgotten long ago. The room was still dark, the city quiet, wrapped in that fragile moment before dawn when the world feels honest. He sat up slowly. The sword leaned against the wall, where he had placed it the night before. Not hanging like a memory. Standing like a companion. Kenji breathed in. Deep. Steady. He dressed, folded his blanket, and stepped outside. The air was cool, sharp, alive. Each breath felt earned. He walked, not rushed, not dragging, toward the dojo. The old building waited for him, unchanged. Silent. Inside, he unrolled the mat alone. At first, the emptiness felt heavy. No voice to guide him. No presence to measure him. Just his breath, his body, and the quiet echo of the space. He began anyway. The movements were slower than before. Careful. Deliberate. He focused on balance, on posture, on the sound of his feet against the wood. When his thoughts wandered, he returned to his breathing. When his muscles trembled, he adjusted instead of forcing. Time passed without him noticing. When the sun rose, its light filtered through the cracks in the ceiling, illuminating dust in the air like tiny drifting stars. Kenji stood still, chest rising and falling, sweat cooling on his skin. He bowed, not to the dojo, not to the past, but to the day ahead. Life did not suddenly become easy. Work was still uncertain. Some days were heavy. Some nights brought old memories knocking softly at his door. There were mornings when his body ached and his mind whispered excuses. But the routine held. Not perfectly. Not rigidly. But faithfully. When Kenji missed a day, he did not spiral. He returned the next morning. When work overwhelmed him, he shortened his training instead of abandoning it. When sleep came late, he still woke with intention, even if only to breathe quietly before starting his day. He stopped waiting to feel motivated. He acted first. Weeks passed. Then months. The apartment changed. Cleaner. Simpler. The sink empty more often than not. Meals prepared instead of ordered. Lights off earlier in the night. Kenji began walking with more presence. People noticed, not because he spoke more, but because he listened. His eyes steadier. His movements grounded. One afternoon, while working at a small cafe, a young man approached him. Nervous. Restless. I've seen you training, the man said. Every morning. Rain or shine. How do you stay so consistent? Kenji paused, considering the question. I don't, he said honestly. I return. The man frowned. Return to what? Kenji smiled softly. To the next right action. That evening, Kenji returned to the dojo and found a small wooden box waiting on the mat. Inside was a folded piece of paper. In his father's handwriting. A routine is not a chain. It is a promise you make to the man you are becoming. Keep it simple. Keep it honest. And when you fall, stand again before the sun does. Kenji sat there for a long time, the paper trembling slightly in his hands. He did not cry. He breathed. Years later, Kenji would teach others, not as a master, but as a man who had learned to stand again. He never spoke grandly, never demanded perfection. He taught them to wake with intention. To move their bodies. To honor small actions. To forgive broken days. And always, to return. On one quiet morning, long after the dojo had been repaired and the city grown louder around it, Kenji stood alone again, older now, lines etched gently into his face. He raised the sword, not in anger, not in struggle, but in calm acknowledgement of the day. The blade caught the light, and in that moment, Kenji understood what his father had always known. A daily routine that works is not built by force. It is built by respect. Respect for time, respect for effort, respect for the fragile, stubborn human heart that keeps choosing to try again. The sun rose, Kenji bowed, and the day, steady and patient, bowed back.